Today we bring you
Reconstructing Spirit Hill. Previously on Reconstructing Spirit Hill. Recommendation was to admit me to the hospital and to induce and abort. That is a tough spot to be placed in, to where you almost feel like you're having to play God. We let him do it. So we went home and prayed.
So after the bad news from the hospital, we returned home, and we couldn't do a whole lot for a couple days because they were finishing our floors. They were putting on the stain, which we were trying to apply a very, very dark stain, an ebony stain, to pine floors, which most people told us couldn't be done. I think it came out pretty good. And then they put on the first 2 layers of the polish in between them putting the paper down on the floor and the sealer actually drying. We had a few hours to kind of come into the house and take a look around and actually see what the house was going to look like with the hardwood floors finished.
Yes, and ladies, if you have never been through a construction phase of your home, be prepared, embrace yourself for the chaos and the mess. The amount of debris and just filth, ick stuff that flies around in the middle of construction surprised me. It stressed me out. So whenever we were at this point that he's talking about where everything had to be really clean because they were finishing the floors, it was a breath of fresh air. It was a nice, exciting time to get to come in and see the pretty, clean elements of the home and let me really kind of start etching away at where I wanted certain features to go. As far as decorative, it was like polishing something. Like when you first see the first piece of a glimmer of polished something or other, then you get excited because you see the beauty starting to unravel.
The beauty of my hard efforts on a hardwood floor.
Are you videotaping or taking a picture?
Videotaping. Okay, what do you think?
Because I don't look very good. That thing is awkward.
They were, at that point, once it dried, they were going to come in and cover the floor in paper so that we could continue working on the house. So Shauna was back on bed rest in the RV, which this time of year it was starting to get fairly hot outside, and the RV's air conditioning was
on the fritz.
It was on the fritz constantly. All right. So basically, as the guys came in and started rolling out paper, my dad was back down and he and I were working on all of the doorways, because when we were working on the trim, we only actually got a couple doors installed, and in order to finish the trim on a lot of walls, we have to have the doors installed because the door trim goes down and then the floor trim runs up to it.
You push on that top shim. Just push it in.
I remember my dad telling me early in the morning that day that it shouldn't take too long to hang the doors.
Well, getting the jambs up is not gonna, it takes a little bit of time.
Famous last words. We had a lot of work to do in getting the doors hung and installed. I mean, when I say a lot of work, this is not like a very simple task. It's not like going to the store and buying pre-hung doors and simply putting them up into the frame. The frames were built correctly, perfectly square, but the doors were coming out of a house that was built in 1900 and they were not square.
On this one, I'm going to give us a little bit more at the top because I don't think the top is quite even. We don't want it to snag.
So every single door that we did, we had to straighten it, cut it, trim it, and then fix old screw holes where the hinges were to put them into place.
Oh, taking off more than I wanted, but we'll just reset the hinge because at this point. You know, you can't force it across like that, but you don't have any control of that. I'm bringing that right to the edge of the jamb so that that's flush with the front of the door. Got that lined up. Just the bit doesn't quite go out to the edge. And run the bit down so it's just touching the wood. Tighten this up, and I think we decided we were going to do 1/8 of an inch. Hit the wood, that sucker starts moving.
We were building doors, retrofitting doors, hanging doors late into the night, and then early the next morning. So we had some really late nights working on the house, trying to get as much done while my dad was in town. We had to come up with some creative ideas to get all the doors held together because we didn't have enough clamps to pull them together, so we kind of invented things as we went. But we slowly got the job done. It was difficult trying to focus on getting a lot of things done, knowing that Shauna was back in the camper, and I'm sure we both had what was, weighing on our minds, this news that we had gotten from the hospital, that we're constantly fighting that battle of doubt versus having faith that God was in control of the situation. It was overall very challenging and very humbling, I think, to both of us.
It's hard to articulate all of the things that went through my mind. The best way to sum it up, I guess, at that moment in time was just not focusing on what the doctors had told us and the negatives and the what ifs, so much as focusing on and reaffirming for myself the truths I knew and just kind of living in a place of thankfulness for that.
Shauna and I grew up with two very different perspectives on our faith, and we had just very recently started to come to a equilibrium. It was also a point in that process where we were being forced to really start expressing our thoughts. I think what we focused the most on with our prayerful thought was just acknowledging that God is love and recognizing that love between us, between our family members, the care and the compassion that other family members took in coming into our home to helping us put it together on both sides of our family. Love is what was creating that child and keeping that child developing.
There was a huge battle going on in my thought, stripping down, so to speak, of everything that I had come to believe or think. I kind of became a bit of a recluse because I knew that I had to work through some very difficult things that I really needed to be able to remove other opinions from, including my own.
What Shauna was going through being on bed rest and not being able to do much, it would appear to the outside world that she was weak, but I have never seen a stronger person be able to take the news that we had received, sit there day after day after day, praying, and to be able to rise above that every single day and elevate her thought. It's just not a challenge that...
Or it's not one that you realize people face.
Yeah.
We have learned just how many people do face these kinds of circumstances, but I mean, you hear about people who have miscarriages or losing a child or just loss. But to live it. As we were dealing with these heavy issues, our daughter was away in the arms of love, having a great time, and being able to just continue happily, unbeknownst to her, the issues that were going on. And our son was able to feel the excitement of a new house and the construction and the fun.
Come on. All right, I'm coming.
And get to learn a few things from the teacher's son, the apprentice teacher.
You know, Benjamin was here every other week during the summertime, and we were working on the house because we had to get the house done. We had to do whatever we could to try and get Shauna out of that camper.
But hold it at the very end. So just, there you go, hold it right there. Make sure it doesn't move. Got it? Good job, buddy. Yep.
And Benjamin would come out every day with me, and I would put him to work with tasks, teach him how to do certain things.
See how close I am to the edge? There you go.
There's something special, I think, about a relationship between father and son or mother-daughter. When you get to sit there and teach kids how to do things, it's not just chores or forcing them into doing things they don't want to do, but it's giving them the ability to start thinking through things. And you notice so much in their own personal growth when you are working on projects like this where they're having aha moments.
I'm trying to make this house be ready, and I'm working with Daddy, and that's okay if I get some.
Ben was very good at sanding, so I had Ben sand a lot. It's one of those things you can't really screw up.
Well, and it's a power tool, so it's like...
You just sit there and hold it and vibrate.
We're going to install the fireplace mantle. I know what to do.
Put your safety goggles on. Pull the trigger.
I wish it could be done right now. And then we will tell Shauna our house is done. Whole house is done. My room is done.
And then, of course, in the afternoons, because this was during the hottest time of year, I would take Ben down to the river, the local swimming hole, and we'd go swimming and cool off from the hard day's work.
I just swam underwater.
Ben had a lot of fun with that. Of course, summertime in North Carolina, AC was on our minds constantly.
It was starting to get real hot.
Yeah, we were constantly fixing the AC in the camper. And when we bought the camper, we bought an older camper. We weren't expecting to live in it. Now that we're in May and June and things are really starting to heat up, she was stuck there in the camper, and if the AC went down, we would bring in fans and do whatever we could to try and like cool her off. But it was like hop to it, get up on the roof and try and figure this thing out.
Well, and it wasn't just myself. We have people trying to work in the house, and you don't want your, workers dripping like sweat all over the place trying to, labor through the house, and there's just nothing that they can do to cool off except for find a shade tree and pour water all over themselves or jump in the river. So that was the next priority on our list, was to get the air conditioning guys out here and get that in the house.
That was done and good to go within a day. The big problem was that when we brought back out the inspector, he wanted the plumbing, the electrical, and the air conditioning
All done.
He came out and we failed the plumbing and we failed the electrical. And you can believe it, when you don't even make it past the box, the main box, 3 wires, the electrical inspector is not going to let things fly. This junk in the bottom of this thing, not okay. You got to check these wires. This one here pulled right out. And I think you can see the other problem with this panel without me pointing it out. The ground rods you see here should be buried in the ground. They should not be sticking up. If you notice, this wire is just rubbing against this metal and the masonry. And it's actually already wearing into the wire itself. Not have a ground and a neutral sharing the same spot, and even if that were okay, that should be fire cogged. I mean, this is just definitely shouldn't put water lines right above an outlet. That is not going to pass because it's basically weakened the wire and it's cut the wire. It really kind of gave up our hopes and dreams of having an air conditioner running for the hottest months of the year. But we immediately started interviewing new plumbers, new electricians. The plumbers came out right away. Those guys did a fantastic job.
They were on it.
Yeah, they got everything hooked up. I think those guys were the fastest, most organized crew I have seen work on this house. Our framers were also extremely good.
Yeah.
But as far as mechanicals go, our last plumber was fantastic. Electrical took a very long time. It was something that ended up dragging on for over a month.
Lots of fun there. We also got our cabinetry in finally.
Okay, so today we're going to be installing cabinets. Each of our cabinets comes in a box. So the first thing we're going to have to do to install the cabinets is obviously build them. And I'm going to attach the clips that will hold on all the other panels. The next step is we're going to go ahead and install the sides of our box. We're going to take the bottom of our cabinet base and just slide it right in. So the top here just has the same type of clips. The range is going to be on the left-hand side. So I think I'd rather this open kind of to the right, away from the range. The last thing you need to do on these cabinets is install these corner braces. There you have it. There's our 9-inch box. I was impressed with the quality. The cabinets went together very well. But for the sink base, we were going to use a refrigerator top cabinet. But the problem is when we got everything set up, this sink, which was this very beautiful farm sink that Shauna had picked out, but it just wasn't going to work. It didn't fit correctly.
I sent him several ideas that I had pinned on Pinterest, or House. Those little apps were like my go-tos.
And it had to be extremely sturdy because that sink is heavy. It's a pretty soft sink.
And so he and I were bouncing ideas back and forth off of one another, trying to think of whatever scrap pieces of wood that we had lying around from previous projects, and then how to utilize those to the best of our abilities, and then maybe only add, a couple pieces.
And then the only other thing we bought from Lowe's were the front posts.
Yeah.
And I think we just used an old step for the base of the cabinet.
It was very hodgepodge to look at all of the pieces of wood prior to him placing it together. But once he put it all together and slapped some paint on it, it worked beautifully for a ornate and unique piece for our sink to sit on. So we luckily had a paint that matched identical.
So we had
color.
We had the paint made.
Oh, we did have it made?
Yeah, that was one of the. We bought the paint.
I thought that was magical. I was like, how did that work?
No, we took a piece of the cabinet down to Lowe's, and they can almost identically match paint. So we got a cabinet paint that was it fit with the cabinets exactly.
As I was ordering things from online so that they could be ready for installation, they were being delivered. So we had our kitchen sink, our bathroom sink, and like the toilets and the range, all of that stuff was starting to be delivered. So as it was arriving, Charlie was figuring out what to do with things. Then we had things like the stove, which took, no lie, probably 3 months to track down because we had ordered it. I look for the little deals.
She ordered a scratch and dent range, like a $4,000 range from Sears. It was
fantastic. I got a really good deal.
$1,500 or $1,800 from their outlet store.
It has a dehydrate feature.
Yeah, and it has you can stick a thermostat in it and just tell it what temperature you want the meat, probe, and it'll just cook the meat.
It's really fantastic.
It's
I needed that stove.
So we did. We needed it very bad, and we were trying to get, a CO on the house. You can't have a CO without a range. It was a mess. They ended up giving us a brand new range
for the
price that we had paid for it.
Blessing.
Yeah.
After some muscling.
Yeah. The rest of this stuff was just kind of exciting when it came in. I mean, we'd get the hood in the mail, and I'd unpackage it and run it out to the camper and be like, Shauna, check it out.
Or more like, hey, this arrived and it's really heavy. Will you come and look at it really quick?
Yeah.
Are you in the mood to move today?
Like that sink, the kids' bathroom sink that you ordered. So this is a basin sink made by Kohler. This is actually a commercial grade sink. My gosh, that thing is like stout. We have Kohler commercial grade faucets. Everything here is commercial grade, and the reason why we wanted something so heavy duty here is that this is our kids' bath.
Have you met children?
Yeah, commercial grade. Go commercial with kids. While we're trying to build the cabinets and everything for the house and assemble the kitchen and it's kind of the minute details, we had some electricians come out and start trying to repair the electrical work, that was turning into a stressful process because they weren't showing up, or they were just kind of like
I was having to call the office because they weren't showing up, or they were only working for a couple of hours and then they would take off and disappear for an hour and then would show back up for an hour and then they'd leave. And
they'd sit on the front porch and chat. It
was just frustrating whenever I didn't understand.
We had a clock ticking, and unfortunately that clock at that point in time started ticking too fast. We didn't realize how quickly that clock was ticking until in the midst of what we were just explaining, I started having contractions. And this is July. And the baby was supposed to be due in October, so
we already knew that we were in uncharted territory, so to speak, I guess you could say. For us, as far as we knew, and as far as what doctors were telling us, or had told us. And we had not seen a doctor since that last consultation. And when the contractions started, we had to just... I felt like time was standing still but fast forwarding at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. I was trying to remain calm. I wasn't feeling an incredible amount of pain when contractions started, but I was conflicted because I felt like, okay, this is it. It's time. And when usually that's such an exciting statement for someone who's expecting, and it was so terrifying, we were just resolute. We knew that it was going to be okay. I did not exactly know how, and I was trying very hard not to dwell on that. But we got in the car and drove to the hospital where we had been seen previously. This
was very early, and so they were dealing with what they call a micro preemie. Because of her medical records, her water had broken significantly earlier. The likelihood and the health concerns, if the baby had any chance at all, they did not have the resources there to do it. So
they were trying to work to refer us to someone more experienced that could handle the baby as it came and whatever circumstance it was, because we had not seen a physician since I think it was 4 or 5 weeks prior to that time. And so took my first ever ambulance ride.
The hospital that we had been going to was about 30 minutes south of us. The hospital that they wanted to transfer her to was 45 minutes to the north of us. So Shauna was being put into an ambulance for over an hour ride while in labor. I could not go with them. I had to follow, and that entire ride was very nerve-wracking. I did not see the ambulance for the first 40 minutes of the drive. I actually ended up catching up to the ambulance for the last 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I don't know how I did that. I'm just sitting there wondering, like, are they okay? What's going on in the ambulance? You definitely don't want the baby to come while they're in the ambulance. At this point, it was really late at night because we had arrived to the first hospital around midnight. It was definitely going on to the wee hours of the morning, 2, 3 a.m. Shauna was just being driven halfway across the state.
Not really that far.
Well,
just an hour. Calm down.
An hour and a half across the state to UNC.
Yes. Once we got there, the air in the rooms, just the ambiance, the panic and the rush and the curiosity.
Because of the situation, we had just about every specialist available to a NICU baby examining the case and coming in and talking to us.
There were a lot of questions. It was interesting because some nurses or doctors or whatever they were that was coming in and out were curious, some were concerned, some were, I mean, you could just feel and see the rotation of emotion. And they had one particular specialist speak to us. Bless them for having to say this to people, for having to have these conversations. Like I don't know how they muster up the strength to have these conversations with people. So many lives that they have to talk to about really unpleasant things. And he gave us scenarios as far as options, what happens if the baby comes out and it's not okay, like what we wanted to do.
He came to us and said, we're all very hopeful, but the reality is that this particular baby most likely has not been able to develop lungs. If the baby had no lungs, there's nothing that they could really do for the baby. What he wanted to know is, should they proceed and try and come up with some sort of solution to keep the baby alive, regardless of what that means for the baby? Or should they just give us the baby?
Or not give us the baby. Like,
give us the baby for those last few moments with the baby, or should they just take the baby away? How do you want to proceed?
It's very hard not to stand your ground as far as your faith and to know that truth that you've been praying and feeling and knowing. I don't want to say it was very hard. It wasn't hard. It was hard to respond to him politely. Whenever I knew the truth, I knew that he was fine. I knew that it would be okay. But what do I tell this doctor in the meantime? And in the offshoot that I'm wrong, what do I say?
I was sticking to the concept of just having confidence in God's good work. And so when he asked us that, I mean, my response to him was to just proceed with confidence, do what came to him to do that was right, based on whatever situation was to unfold. It was weird because then he kind of changed his demeanor towards us a little bit. And he asked us if we had picked out a name yet, and we had not.
We had narrowed it down to like 2. We just hadn't settled on anything just yet, and this came suddenly as far as it being actually time. So
he told us that we should just stop thinking about other things and pick out a name and start planning a birthday party.
Which of course, me in that position made me all waterworks. I was just like, okay, you know. Ugh.
We had settled on Abner Craig, which Abner was a biblical name, so it was very fitting for Abner. It was a very strong name. And then it was
peaceful for a little while. All of the doctors and everybody cleared the room because I mean, really it was just a matter of letting my body do what it was gonna do. And then it was me and one nurse. Charlie had stepped out to call his sister, and
yeah, and as soon as the door shut behind me,
not as soon as, it was probably 15 minutes, maybe 5.
It was probably 5 because the doctors were still in a clump down at the end of the hall, and they had just dispersed when the alarm went off. Ran into the room. It was just Shauna and the nurse. The nurse was running circles around Shauna, and as I went across the bed, I looked down and I just saw this tiny little baby. And I just remember hearing the baby cry. And I looked at Shauna and I was just like, he's got lungs. And that's when, you know, everything that we had been working towards, you know, our entire faith, right there, when the second that little squeak came out, that
it's okay. So after he graced us with his presence in a flash, the doctors took over. I actually didn't get to see him until a few hours later, whenever they were wheeling me to a room, and they took me to the NICU. They took me in there and I was able to see him, just get to see this beautiful, tiny living creation, and I don't know, it was a relief for a small period of time, but also heartbreaking because I couldn't hold him, I couldn't do anything else for him, it felt like. So with him, being admitted into the NICU and me in the women's hospital recovery, then it was beginning the next phase, as you will, of what we would consider life as we know it.